Hello, hello. We are live. Hey, everybody. I'm Skylar Rogers from FormAssembly. And if you signed up for the power of Prefill, how to make the most of the Salesforce Workflow Connectors and its capabilities, then yep, you're in the right place. That's exactly what we're going to talk about today. Um, we got a lot to cover. This is, I'm always so excited about these, but you'll find out why I'm excited about this one in just a second. But before I get into it and introduce everybody, a little bit of housekeeping because we do get a lot of questions up front and kind of throughout the presentation. If it's one of your first times joining us in this webinar platform, it's called On24. You'll see a few things around the screen that you can use while we're talking. Obviously, you'll see us speaking. You'll see the slides that you can kind of move over or highlight or emphasize or zoom around the screen if you want. But there's also a handy box there for Q&A. Anything you put in there is going to be submitted to the queue for us as the speakers, and we definitely hope to have some time to get to Q&A at the end. So if while we're talking and demonstrating, anything kind of relevant to the conversation comes up that you'd love to ask us about, just throw it in that Q&A box. We'll try our best to get to it. I might have already mentioned this, but we'd love to say as much as we can. Yes, we are recording this. So if you can't make the whole thing, you come in a little bit late, don't worry, this will hit your inbox shortly after we wrap things up. That's also handy because, like I mentioned, we're going to be going through some kind of direct yet quick demonstrations today. So if you see something related to this topic or related to your setup that might be worth saving and revisiting, absolutely go ahead with that recording, and you'll be able to follow along with that demonstration if you can't catch everything today. So check out some of those tools, give us some Q&A, check out the resources that are available in the resources section on the screen as well. But with that said, we've got special guests as always. First up, Joelle, going to drop some knowledge because she's kind of on our knowledge team today. What's up, Joelle?
Hey, Skylar. Hey, everyone. I'm Joelle Swanson, the product trainer here at FormAssembly, and I've been here for a little over 5 years now. Wow, how time flies. It's so crazy. But it's one of my favorite things is getting to come on these and talk to you guys, help you learn more about our product. If you don't already know, I love teaching people and I love helping people. So this is one of my favorite parts of my job. But to start off with, you pulled a quote from a customer, right, Skylar?
Yeah, you heard me say I'm excited. Joel and I were, talking before this. We said we're always so excited. Hopefully it doesn't feel fake, but we legitimately get to talk to customers, talk to people at events. This stuff really does geek us out. But on this particular topic, this is one of those ones where it's not necessarily a beginner level webinar or a kind of knowledge training for people. This is one of those ones where if you get Inform Assembly, you really start using some of the advanced features. Man, the stuff you're going to see today is kind of what we call the cool stuff. It really does enable that above and beyond sort of capabilities or really unique use cases that teams have in mind across like all industries. So we're like, well, maybe someone's already sort of said this, right? And yeah, we've got a number of quotes on hand from people that kind of got in the prefill world and started to see the benefits there. But when this stuff's really set up and rocking and rolling, you can see the quote on the screen here, like all of a sudden, one of these workflows kind of set up around one of these forms is saving people from having to go into about 8 different objects or technologies across their company. This is Cornell saying, you can imagine the process someone would have had to go through to do some of this stuff manually. It really was hours of work for them. And yeah, when you're flitting between various different technologies, connections, setups, tools, platforms, and or having to do some of this stuff manually, as we all know, like the chance for mistakes rises when you're doing that. So this quote was really good for me. It really does kind of sum up, some of the theme for today, which is that power of prefill. Not just a nice to have, but really can do some business changing work for especially for smaller teams. So this person was excited too. It's not just me and Joel.
Yes, yeah, I really do love our prefill features, both in like the form Salesforce Prefill Connector. That one is such a great connector, and I love how much functionality and everything it brought to the forms. But today I really want to build on that with the Salesforce Workflow Connector, because it just extends so much of that foundation to solve additional use cases, give you more flexibility of how and when data enters your workflow. And so today, we're not going to cover every single individual capability that the connector does. Instead, I really want to highlight some practical examples that I hope you can use directly in your own processes, and also get the ideas flowing so that you can look at your workflows differently and see some new opportunities. So the way that we're going to go through today isn't going to be, like I said, listing features. We're going to focus on that prefill power, and we're going to walk through some scenarios. So first off, we're going to look at how to prefill a contact record from Salesforce. Then getting into a way to use a prefilled link, again with a Salesforce button to open that prefilled workflow. Then kind of diving in a little bit deeper into how to prefill repeatables and prefill mid workflow, which really unlocks even more awesome flexibility with your workflows. And then we'll have a wrap up with some benefits recap. And don't worry, we'll have plenty of time for questions. But as I'm going through, feel free to enter any questions that you guys have. We are joined by our wonderfully talented knowledge and training coordinator, Kayla Condello, who will be answering some questions as we go through. But don't worry, like I said, I'll be answering lots of questions here at the end. And again, this isn't going to be an exhaustive list of what Prefill can do, but I do hope that as we go through these, you're just thinking of your own examples and your own processes. And if you want to share those, feel free. I always love to see what our customers are doing. You guys, I always say, are so creative, and I'm still learning new things from you guys.
Mm-hmm.
Before we jump into the first example, though, I do kind of want to zoom out for just a moment and highlight some of the different ways that I've seen Prefill show up with our customers, and get you thinking about where data can be introduced automatically, where you can prefill and start seeing those opportunities. So the first one is a sales team member clicks a button to log a deal hurdle in Salesforce, and it opens up a prefilled workflow. And with this prefilled workflow, they're not having to retype account details. All of that information is already there, so they just have to enter in the specific deal hurdle information. Or, after an appointment, you receive a follow-up form, and that follow-up form has all of your appointment details already filled in. So you or the recipient isn't starting from scratch and having to re-enter everything. They're just needing to go in, confirm the follow-up, or add more context, or whatever needs to be done. Another example is an IT request form, and this can be pre-filled with an employee's name, department, role, all of that information that's already an IT system about you. And so you don't have to re-enter that, and you can just put in the details you need for the request. Another example is a volunteer receives a shift confirmation form/workflow that is going to detail their role, their information, the date. And so they can just click, yep, that sounds good to me. And everything they have is right there, and they can start their shift right away. They don't have to come in and check in. And then we also have a training. So after a training, an employee is directed to a feedback form that's filled with information about the session that they just attended, so that then you can make sure when you go back later for any analytics or metrics or things, everything is correctly associated to that session. And the final example to kind of get those juices flowing is a client clicks a link to update those account details, and it's already got all of their details in it. And so they have to just change the things that are changing. They don't have to worry about retyping everything. And really the common thread throughout all of those is thinking about ways you can reduce friction by having that data that you already have for respondents or for the entries into the form, and minimizing that duplicate data entry and being very intentional of when you need to pull that data in and use it to help your processes. And with all of that,
Yeah. I was gonna say, amazing, setup of the table, right? Whether you're listening in or zooming in on some of those specific examples yourselves, audience. Maybe it's already inspiring, some possible examples. Maybe these are things that you and your team have tried to tackle in the past. I will say, as we get into specific demos, if it wasn't apparent already, say this all the time. FormAssembly's been around about 20 years now. So if you've got a long time account with us, you've only dealt with FormAssembly at kind of like the forms level and done some of our prefill capabilities at the form level. Totally understand that capability and that functionality, those capabilities go back quite a ways. But what you're going to be seeing today is at the workflow level, right? So if you've got an existing form, you've got a workflow that's adding additional steps, baking in additional logic to kind of automate some of these processes and do some of these prefill capabilities as well. So if things on the screen look a little bit different than your account, or you haven't messed around with workflows a ton, that's why. And yeah, hopefully today's a little bit educational, a little bit inspirational for prefill on the workflow side, not just on kind of like a single form, right?
yes, thank you for that context, Skylar. But with that, let's go ahead and take a look at our first example. And it's going to be one of the most common things that I've seen prefill used with, and that's prefill and contact records. And when you're prefill and contact records, you can use it in so many different ways. And really, you just got to think, where are you interacting with customers or respondents that you already have information on them in your system? So you can take advantage of that and prefill their data for them. Today, though, I want to start with something simple, something familiar, something we've all done at some point, and that's signing up for an event and what that workflow can look like. So to start off with, I want to invite some contacts using my Salesforce email template here that I've got up. And I want to send this out to all of my contacts, but then still have a personalized link so that they have the prefilled link with all of their information already in it. And one way to do this is with the, perfect, thank you, Skylar, that link right there. It's going to be that workflow, and I'm using the Salesforce merge fields with the workflow. Now, when this email gets sent out to the respondents, this is what they're going to see. They're going to see that thank you email. Thank you for your dedication. And we'd like to extend this email or this link so that you can register for this special event. And so when they click on it, give me just a second to share my screen. This is going to be what those respondents see. There we go. And so we've got Frank here. And so when Frank opens this up, his information's already all there. He can go ahead and add a guest. He can confirm his information. And all he has to do is click submit, and he is going to be registered for this event. So he doesn't have to do too much to get that registered. Now, how exactly is all of this set up in FormAssembly when you go into your workflow? If we go over to my workflow right here, we've got this prefill contact workflow. And the first step when you're prefilling a workflow is going to be opening up these workflow properties and setting a URL parameter for the workflow. Now, these workflow parameters, you can either do a secure or unsecure parameter. Now, when I say secure, it doesn't necessarily, the secure, is going to just create a encrypted key that is going to be attached to the workflow link. And that key has to be a part of your workflow link to be able to pull data. If it's not there, it's not going to pull anything. But on the other hand, a unsecure doesn't necessarily mean it's unsecure. It just doesn't include that encrypted key. And so the choice to use a secure versus unsecure is really going to depend on your use case and also your organization's security requirements. Now, when we take this workflow parameter, this contact ID, we're going to use that in our first step, which is a Salesforce workflow step. And here in the configuration, I've already got it configured to prefill a contact as the first action. And I'm going to use that unsecure contact ID parameter for the lookup to the contact ID from my Salesforce. And just a quick aside here, if you have used our Form Salesforce Prefill connector, you're going to have to use a different one to have that submit data. This is going to be our Salesforce Workflow Connector, which allows you to both pull data from Salesforce and also send data to Salesforce. So this one connector is doing both actions. So when you use a lookup record action, you can not just find it if you need to locate a record, but you can also use it to then map to your form fields in that first form or whatever form in your workflow you need it to. So here I'm mapping to those form fields to pre-fill those fields we saw, but I'm also going ahead and mapping to workflow variables in my workflow. And I really love the use of workflow variables here in the lookup action, because I'm not just filling in and pulling data into the form. I'm pulling data and pre-filling these variables that I can, once they are created, use and reference anywhere in the workflow. So I'm not just displaying data in the form, I'm taking it and using it where I need it to and being very purposeful. And finally, after you finish configuring the workflow, the next thing is going to be building that pre-filled link for your respondents. Now, one thing I really love about workflow is if you come back to the workflow properties and click publish, we actually have a prefill link builder here. So we can see here's that standard URL there. And if I scroll down, we have the URL parameters. So I'm able to just come in here and type in anything I want. So let's just say there's that contact ID, and it is building the link for me. So now all I have to do is copy that link, and I can know that it's going to be free of errors. I don't have to do the manual effort of building that, and it is ready to go. If I'm using those Salesforce merge values, I can copy and paste them in down here, and then that link will be ready for me. And this is just something that I really love with our new workflow, is that ability to have those pre-filled links generated for you. Now, with this, we just saw the email, but what if you have another one, like another way to share the form, of thinking a different way? And that's going to be using a Salesforce button to open a pre-filled workflow. And so this is kind of that same idea that we just saw, but instead of a link, we're going to be going into our Salesforce record. So here I've got my account record, and I've got a button, the submit feedback button, that's going to open up a pre-filled link. And so I really want to drive home that it's not necessarily how someone accesses the pre-filled link. They can access it through an email, through this button, through a website if you're pre-filling like campaign details. Anywhere you need your respondents to access it, you can put a pre-filled link. And so whenever, like say, a sales team member or a support team member or a CSM or whoever has interactions with customers and wants to submit feedback, they can click on this link, which will then open up this pre-filled form with all of those account details already filled out. And this is actually something that we use ourselves at FormAssembly that makes it so much easier, so that when we're working with customers, we can just click on a link and it pre-fills all of the information for that customer into the form. And we just kind of come in here and enter in the feedback or whatever details that we need to enter in for that customer. And it will then go through the workflow and create it for that specific customer. And just really makes it easy to focus just on that feedback and smooth our way. And kind of going into our workflow, if you kind of want to see that, that's going to be, again, the same thing, just a little different. So we've got the workflow parameter account ID that is then being pulled into our Salesforce Workflow Connector. And we are looking up the account record using the account ID as equals the unsecure account ID parameter, and pre-filling those fields and variables here. And so really it is going to be those same mechanics, just a different access point. And that flexibility is really so useful with workflow, being able to pull in and use that prefill wherever you need it. Now, I want to look at something that adds a new layer to the power of prefill, and that's going to be prefilling repeatables. And when we go to prefill repeatables, instead of just pulling like that single account, single contact that we've seen, we're going to expand on that of saying, okay, great. I don't want to just prefill one contact. I want to look up an account and I want to prefill all the contacts associated with that account. And so we're going to start off kind of like we just did with a parameter of an account ID that's going to be pulled into the Salesforce Workflow Connector. And the first action is going to be a lookup account record using that account ID and the insecure account parameter. And then in the mapping, I've got a couple things where I'm mapping to the account name in the form and the account ID in the form, but I'm also going to go ahead and map that account ID twice. And I map the account ID as a workflow variable that I'm going to use pretty much immediately in this prefill repeatable contact section. And here I'm looking up that contact ID, contact record, and the lookup query. I'm looking at the account ID on my contact, and that's what I'm matching it to with the workflow variable. And from there, the next step that I need to make sure to pull all of those contacts, I want to set if multiple records found to select all records. And so that's going to select all of those records. So if I've got 6 contacts, it's going to select all 6 of those contacts here and run this action for each of them. Then I've got the mapping. So these are mapped to the repeatable section in my form. That is the contact details, so that each section gets created a new section, a new repeated instance for each record. And the final thing to ensure that happens is mapping the repeated content. And by default, this usually appears with the workflow. If you have the workflow, it's going to select either the last contact record that is found or concatenate them. So if you want a separate repeated instance for each contact record, you're going to select the repeatable section from your form that you want to be prefilled. And that is all you have to do to prefill all of those repeated contacts into your form. Now, what exactly does that look like from a respondent side? So here's that form. I've got the Express Logistics account from my developer account pulled in, and I've got this Barbara, Josh, Amelia, Heidi, and Tom being all pre-filled into this workflow. So if I need to go in and be like, oh, great, Heidi, her last name, she updated it, or, oh, we need to make a change to the emails because we have updated the emails, I can come in here and do all of that for these contacts. And that's really just one way to use repeatable actions to pull in all of that data I need and all of those records from Salesforce into the form. And with that, we've looked at a lot of prefilling at the beginning of a workflow, and that is so useful. But there's another way that you can use the prefilling that I feel like also highlights the value of workflows. And with that, that's going to be our prefill mid workflow. And prefilling mid workflow is going to allow you to take respondent data or build on that data and pull in more information from your Salesforce depending on where in the process your respondents are. So for this example, we're going to look at a events availability and upcoming events workflow. So here in my workflow, I'll quickly explain what's going on. We've got a venue selection form where my respondents can go in, select a venue, and then they'll click next page. And so what they'll see is a next page and go to page 2. But in reality, what's happening is when they click next page, it then sends through the Salesforce connector here And if I go into the configuration, it's going to be looking up an events record and pulling in the events with that venue. Now, this is going to be a repeatable events section, so everything's going to be the same as we just talked about. One thing I do want to highlight here, though, is that with repeatable actions in the Salesforce Workflow Connector, you can use preconditions. And these preconditions state, hey, if this, then run. If this is true, then run, and allow you to really control when and how those repeatable actions run and when they get pre-filled. So for example, I have, if that events venue selection is blank, then I do not want this action to run. So I have the precondition, if that venue selection is not blank, then run this action. If I had like a repeatable something, then it could do that. So really allowing those preconditions to state when and how those repeatable actions run. And then, of course, this all gets pre-filled into my second form here. Now, let's take a quick look at what our respondent sees when they see that. So here in the form, we see that events venue selection. I'll select Arbor Hall, click Next. And then that's their Salesforce connector running, pulling up all of those event records. And then here, we've got it all pre-filled, so we can see all of those event records being pre-filled. And so our respondents can come through, select to register for the event, individual ones, all of them, whatever they would like. And that is one way of using pre-fill mid-workflow. Before you move on, though, I do have some bonus pre-fill options that I want to talk about with the mid-workflow, just simply because there's some options that you're able to use throughout your workflow to make it work more for you. So with these bonus pre-fill options, to kind of set the stage, is this is going to be a services request workflow where my customers can come in and select what services they would like, and then it goes to Salesforce. But the first option, bonus option that I want to talk about is not only is it creating that opportunity and those requests in Salesforce. In my Salesforce Workflow Connector, I have that lookup account running. And with that lookup account, I'm going to go ahead and actually send back to this services request form their priority customer level. And so I can state with this connector if this customer is a priority customer. And I can then use that value that I've sent back to this form in a conditional step. And with this conditional step, if I is a priority customer, according to Salesforce, I want to then follow up with them. And that's just one, the first option is being able to use that Salesforce data and pull it into the step before, and be able to use that data in your workflow to make decisions. Then the second option is going to be not necessarily a Salesforce one, but it's something that I feel like is always worth mentioning, and that's going to be form-to-form pre-fill. So the customer fills out that request form. Great. When I have the sales team member come up and follow up with that customer, I want them to be able to see everything that customer filled out without having to find all the related records in Salesforce and go to find different things. So with this one, all I'm doing is on that form step, I'm using that pre-fill tab, and I'm pulling in the fields from that first form, that request form, into this. So my team member can see everything that the customer has submitted, and they can go through and add to the fields or add additional details and stuff when they're on the call following up with that customer. That is just option 2. And the last option I want to talk about is going over how you can use those pre-filled variables, not just at the beginning, which we saw those that were created at the beginning, but you can also create and pre-fill those variables at any point. So circling back up to the Salesforce connector here, I have created with that lookup account the variable for account ID, and I've also looked up a contact where I've done the return variable for the contact ID. And so I'm pre-filling those variables so that then after my team member has followed up, I can have another Salesforce Workflow Connector where it's creating a task. And for my Salesforce, a task has to include that account ID and contact ID. And so rather than creating duplicate actions, duplicate steps to do that, I'm able to have just this one action in this connector that is using those workflow variables that I've pre-filled to create that task and simplify that task creation. And that's all the bonus options I've got for you guys today. And I know I talked through so many different examples and I'm afraid of sounding like a broken record, but let's just have a quick refresher on all of those examples. So to take away, we can pre-fill those variables to use Salesforce data anywhere in your workflow. And that means you're not just limited to what is filled into those form fields or what you're pulling into those form fields. You can reference workflow data anywhere in your connectors, later connectors, in the decisions of what actions are running in your connectors, and allow your workflows to be smarter and more connected by pre-filling those variables. You can also quickly create pre-filled links using the link builder. And so whether it's a email, Salesforce button, anywhere else that you need that pre-filled link, you're able to use that link builder to save time and ensure that your links are accurate every single time to get those ready links. And then we have using preconditions when pre-filling repeatable records. And this is really a game changer because it really allows you to control exactly when a repeatable action runs for each instance. And that level of control just opens up even more possibilities for dynamic workflows. And something that I love because that's always been a huge ask for something, those repeatable records. And then the last benefit is going to be use respondent data to retrieve additional records from Salesforce. So whether you're starting at the beginning of a workflow or mid-workflow, when you're pre-filling, you can take that information you have from Salesforce to enter it in, but you can also be like, oh, great, the respondent entered in this. Let's go ahead and add and pull more information from Salesforce to give them an easier time. And so you're able to have workflows that adapt to the situation for each respondent. And really, all of these benefits, I just feel like isn't just a convenience, it's a tool to help help your respondents reduce duplicate work, streamline your processes, and really just give you the flexibility and control to do exactly what you need to do with your workflows. And it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. You can absolutely mix and match all of those different techniques that I talked about today to really do what you need to do.
Ooh.
Like I said, it's a lot of stuff.
Yeah. Like we say, this is like what we were saying before, is this is the cool stuff training, right? Because we could easily spend a whole day, right, on all the various kind of use cases we've seen, all the unique kind of solutions people have come up with since workflows were invented, but especially since, kind of the Salesforce Workflow Connector came out last year and kind of opened up a lot of these possibilities. Hopefully a few light bulbs going off, for people in the audience, as you see some of those examples. I know we had to cover them quickly, but like we mentioned, go take this recording home with you if you want to walk through some of those steps again, or yeah, hopefully it's inspired you to maybe look up some of the training or dig into your own workflow builder, and try some of those configuration steps and set some of those preconditions, variables, and various prefill options there too. But yeah, we've shown off a lot. We know from some of the audience data that comes in that, hey, some people are kind of window shopping FormAssembly, wanting to see a demonstration of some of this or curious about some of these capabilities, and this webinar kind of covers things that they're curious about. So we love to put this question on there. If you wanted to dig in a little deeper and you're not yet an existing FormAssembly user, or maybe you have an account and you're watching today, a couple options on the screen here. Like I said, if you're not a customer yet and you'd like a rep of ours to reach out about a demo covering this more in depth, go ahead and hit that first option there. If you saw something that's maybe not on your account and you'd love to talk to a FormAssembly account manager about what are my upgrade options or access options to some of these features, that's that second option there. We currently have an account, but we'd love to talk to an account manager. So go for that. Just raise your hand here, and that'll be a shortcut to getting someone to reach out to you. Otherwise, of course, we're always standing by or available via the website if you want to reach out there as well. Thanks for responses there. I see some coming in. Great. One other thing, whenever we bring up this topic, like I said, this connector's been out for just about a year now. I see it sometimes popping up in the Q&A here, for instance, people saying, hey, I'm usually working exclusively at the form level, the FormAssembly form builder. A lot of our setup is happening there. Some of our prefills or conditional logic is sort of set up there. We're kind of wary of disrupting our existing forms. It's one of the reasons we haven't quite migrated over to the workflow builder or tried to build some of this, the equivalent of our current setup over in workflows, because we don't want to mess up kind of what we have, or maybe we're not sure about the steps that we need to do to at least transfer what we have over, but obviously start unlocking some of the potential or additional features that you may have seen going on in the workflows today, and some of that branching logic, form-to-form capabilities, additional functionality of preconditions, custom variables, and things that the workflow connectors sort of unlock. So because we're having this conversation over and over with people, I thought I'd highlight it here too. If that's you and you're not quite sure about migrating over to the workflow builder because you've got kind of a legacy setup with your forms, you've got a few options, right? First, check whatever your account level is. FormAssembly's had, a few different variations and iterations of the platform over the past 20 years. So if you're on kind of a legacy account and you saw some functionality today that doesn't seem to be, accessible on yours, that's the first thing you should check, right? If your account doesn't have workflow access, well, start there. That's what we should kind of look into first. We've got a number of options, kind of different plans or ways of kind of assembling or adding on to an account to get you set up with some of the stuff that you saw. But knowledge articles, we love to hype these. Anytime we put out a new feature, new functionality, or kind of upgrade our capabilities, the knowledge team on the back end is constantly writing up new technical documentation that helps walk through this, right? So if this has seemed like an intimidating subject or something that's not as familiar to you as just straight form builders, hit up some of those knowledge articles. We've hopefully given you one to start off with right in the resources section that you see in the corner here. Hopefully you'll see a knowledge article that can send you over to the Salesforce Workflow Connector, for instance. And some of the kind of sub articles or subsections within there would take you to some of the various parts of using that Salesforce Workflow Connector that you saw on screen today, right? So knowledge articles are a great way to see more images, more kind of click-by-click walkthroughs in some instances of what this stuff is, how to set it up, and some examples of kind of how you could be using it, right? Last but not least, again, we've seen so many unique use cases over the years. We understand your teams are doing a lot. If you've got a truly complex setup and just fiddling around in the workflow builder or some beginner articles in the knowledge section aren't quite helpful for you, we do have an implementation team. This is a bonus service and a service that can be kind of purchased through FormAssembly. And yeah, it's absolutely the case that sometimes just a one-time, working with our implementation team, reaching out to them, asking about what's possible, could save your team a lot of time in the long run and get you kind of sprinting with the full capabilities of some of these features sort of right away if going through the other methods of migration or manual migration aren't it for you. So we love to mention all three of these. They've come in handy for people, but again, if you're on a small team or you've felt sort of wary of diving a little deeper into the workflow builder, you've got options, some that are on the site already and some that we'd be happy to help you with. So keep those in mind.
Yes, thank you, Skylar. Yeah, it is always kind of hard to kind of move between the forms and the workflow, and there is always a lot of questions. And that's actually kind of something that I want to start off our questions with, is that I'm seeing a lot of questions about they're using these, should I move over? What is the difference between like the form Salesforce Prefill connector and the new Salesforce Workflow Connector? And so if you are using the form Salesforce Prefill connector, that is going to be our kind of quote unquote legacy, our classic version. So we have the form native ones, which if you've been using that prior to, we just released our Salesforce Workflow Connector about almost a year ago. So if you're using that beforehand, yeah, you're using the legacy one, the form native one. But don't worry, that one's still functioning and it's still great. Like I said, this one, the Salesforce Workflow one, is just going to be one that I feel like it's a little bit more intuitive because we have those user-friendly actions that you're able to configure. And when you saw all the examples today, use that. So if that's something that you're interested in, definitely look into. If your account has access to workflow, you can move over to workflow and start testing those out. Or if your account doesn't, definitely reach out to our sales team and they can get that discussion rolling. So a couple demos and stuff to see kind of even more of those benefits that I talked than what I talked about today of that Salesforce Workflow Connector. And then the next thing that I kind of want to cover is one that started off with is that link and having that link and using those links. So one of the questions was, does the link to the workflow need to live in Salesforce to be used as a merge field? And no, it doesn't. So the first example, that email link is a workflow link. It does not live in my Salesforce. All I did was just write the email. And whenever you're writing those Salesforce emails, I just inserted that merge field at the end of where I copied and pasted the pre-filled link into where I would normally copy and paste that contact ID. I just inserted the merge field. If you're using a Salesforce button, then yeah, that button does need to live in Salesforce, or the link does, so that you can use the merge fields. But there's a variety of ways that you can use merge fields with Salesforce. And if you're more curious about that, I would definitely check out Salesforce's. There's so much data and so many places you can use links in Salesforce. Another one about like the links and the prefilled link is, what if they are wanting to use a word or a couple words instead, or use a status on a case in the link as a parameter? So you can definitely attach it to the prefilled link as a parameter, but you can also, in the workflow, as I stated, you can have the lookup criteria. So I'm just going to use the example of a parameter, that question of a parameter on a status on a case be used in the link. You don't necessarily need to have that in the prefilled link. You can set that as one of the lookup criteria in the action. So if you are looking up cases related to a contact, you can look up the cases related to a contact and say, okay, great. One of the lookup criteria is status equals active, and set that up in the connector itself rather than needing to use those parameters. But another benefit of the parameters is you can pre-fill anything that you want into the workflow. You can pull in and say, great, I want this campaign ID to be part of the parameter, or I want this campaign title. You can use that with the parameters. They don't necessarily need to be IDs or something. You can use them as you need to. And then the next question is going to be around like the repeatables. We've got quite a few. So one of them is on the event example. How does the repeatable data look on the connector / enter to Salesforce? So with that one, it's going to be kind of twofold. So as you saw, we pre-filled it into the form, and when it gets sent back to Salesforce, all you're going to do is kind of engineer that in reverse. Instead of using a lookup action, you'd use a update or create or connection to that event record, and you'll just do that where you'll set it to map all repeated instances and then the field mappings, and then just that repeated content is going to be the key mapping there to send that data to Salesforce. Another question does custom fields work from Salesforce with a prefill as well? And I can say that yes, yeah, they definitely do. You can use the Salesforce Workflow Connector to pull any data from your Salesforce. I didn't highlight it in my examples, but one of my examples, I did actually use custom fields from my records in the Prefill connector. So it is totally possible to use any of those fields that you have access to as the authenticated user in the connector. So that's the only difference, is as long as you're the authenticated connector, you have access to everything you have access to in Salesforce.
Likewise for creating some of those custom variables, right? Like the variable didn't have to be a piece of data that was entered already on the form or workflow that we were working with, right? I could have already pulled, anything from the Salesforce records and started to use that as a custom variable to use throughout the workflow, right?
Correct. Yes. Yeah. Like, one of them, the one that I didn't highlight, was the position. So I was pulling that position into a workflow variable. That's a custom value from Salesforce. And so I can pull that in and use that throughout my workflow and really take advantage of everything that is available.
Yeah.
Then the next one is going to be kind of back to that email that they're asking if it can be scaled out to a mass email campaign and if it is able to be pre-filled based on a report tied to that email campaign, and have that link out and allow their contacts to open it and update contact info in their Salesforce based off of the campaign. And yes, you can build that out. You can have multiple parameters in there. And the pre-filled link, most of my examples just use the one parameter, but you can use as many as you would like and pull as much data into that pre-filled link as you would like to really update. If you want to update a campaign and a contact, you can pull both of those in and really do all that you would like to.
Yeah, is that related to that last example where you were talking about pre-fills mid workflow? Then, if people are kind of revisiting some of the demonstrations.
I think that one was for the first demonstration for the emails, but that is again ties into the fact that you can mix and match all of these. Like, it's not necessarily a one size fits all of, yeah, you can open up that campaign and your respondents can start entering in their information. It goes through to a next page to cycle through the Salesforce connector and page 2. So really customize it and everything. With the last few minutes, I do want to make sure that, Kayla, were there any that you were answering as we were going through that you feel like need to be called out? Any questions?
Oh my gosh, yes. We got some really fun ones in here. I was having the best time, by the way. You guys have some really cool use cases. You were making me think. This was fun. Okay. So basically, I've got two fun ones. So first, I'm going to call out that Workflow has something, and this is slightly unrelated to Prefill, and I apologize for that. But okay, so in that first example where there was, select from the list of venues, and then it shows like, the events related to the venues, that kind of one. There was a question about how sometimes people will try using the back button because they wanted to see what was at a different venue, and then it like breaks the workflow, right? Okay, so quick thing on that, fun facts. The way to work around people hitting the back button when they probably shouldn't is we actually have a step called a go-to step, and it can like zoom you around. And we also have conditionals. So you can put a conditional in there, and on the like form itself, you could put a thing saying like, would you like to see another venue? And it's like, yes or no. And if they click yes and submit, then it can loop them backwards safely without them hitting the back button. So I just wanted to throw that in there because it was like such a good point, and I'm sure somebody else has run into that at some point. So I just wanted to chuck out that little nugget of knowledge. But my favorite one, and this actually had me like scrambling to take notes. Okay. Sarah asked, is it possible to use the Salesforce connector to add to a Salesforce field rather than overwrite it? For example, adding to a text field or a multi-select pick list without losing what's already in Salesforce. So for those who don't know, Salesforce has a bit of a finicky moment here where Salesforce itself does not allow you to append any update in Salesforce is an overwrite. Like it's just how Salesforce's API works, right? But you're right. And that's why I'm so excited about this, because you're correct. Now, multi-select pick list, I would have to do some testing, so please do not quote me on the multi-select pick list one. But for adding to a text field, I think you could. I think you could pull that value back, put it into a workflow variable, and then have a formula that's like workflow variable plus more text, and then send it back in. Don't you think, Joanna?
I would.
That sounds right.
Yeah, that it would actually be possible, because I have used formulas with the workflow variables to conditionally send data to Salesforce. So you could absolutely just be like, hey, like this workflow variable that we have up there, send this, but also, hey, plus add this from this form field and send that full value to Salesforce. That is totally possible. That's a great call out, Sarah.
That's such a good idea. Okay, so yeah, I've taken many notes. Fun fact, we also, our team also handles the help documentation if you spent any time in there. I've taken notes. We're going to have to go test that one. But if we test that and we find some cool ways to do it, yeah, we'll have to put out a use case help document on that. So there's like a use cases section in help docs. That may have to come out, because that's really, really cool. Yeah. Oh yeah, Crystal just said, yeah, you'd have to just make sure it doesn't max out the length on the Salesforce field. But like, I love that idea. Absolutely love that idea. But yeah, then I will, okay, so I saw this question. I see this question a lot, right? Salesforce workflow at the beginning, the question was, how does this apply to like the workflows built in FormAssembly? Some people do wonder about Salesforce flow and FormAssembly workflows, how they work together, how they don't work together, similarities, differences. Our workflows in FormAssembly, they have the spirit of the Salesforce flows. There's a lot of differences, but there are similarities, especially like I said, in like the spirit of what they're trying to do, which is process information before it lands in its final place, right? You know, it's all about that data journey from like data here, data will end up here, do stuff in between. So that is very much part of this. So you can actually interact with Salesforce flows via your FormAssembly workflows by updating, say, a trigger field. You know, if you have a Salesforce flow that fires off a trigger when a particular field is updated, you can fire that from your FormAssembly workflow simply by having a connector update that field, for example. There's things like that you can do to get these things to work very, very well together. And that's one of my favorite aspects of the scenario, is it's pretty seamless when you put it all together. So Joelle actually had talked a little bit about that feedback example, that we do that. It's a Salesforce flow and a FormAssembly workflow put together. It's actually those two things, because there's a Salesforce flow that looks at the updated record, and actually it does a little extra processing, so that you don't have to fill everything out in the form. So the amounts that you fill out in the form, it'll then actually go and grab even extra stuff and take care of it. So I just wanted to mention that, because like we said, this is the cool stuff webinar. The possibilities are endless, inspiration. So I thought I'd just bring up those couple of questions, since I don't know, I saw the excitement and inspiration in them.
Yes, I love those questions. Those are such great questions to bring up too. Like, I love seeing everyone's, how they're using the workflow and what they come up with. And like I said at the beginning, I learn new stuff from our customers because they think of ways to use our features that I didn't even think of. So I'm really excited to test out a couple of those things that we're hearing that you saw in the questions earlier, Kayla. But I think that's all that we've got time for, right, Skylar?
I think so. With just a few seconds left, right? Want to do one more call out to some of the resources that we provided at the start here. Your resource section is visible here and on 24. Check that out. If you haven't hopped over to it already, we've given you kind of a starter link to go over to our help documentation where the Salesforce Workflow Connector documentation starts, might be a great tab to go stash away, waiting for this recording, or just, if you want to pick up some additional inspiration right away, the Help and Knowledge Center for sure. There's another link there. Again, if you're curious about your access to some of this functionality and/or adapting your existing plan to get more access to it, or don't have the Salesforce connector yet, and you'd like it, another link there to get in touch with somebody. And finally, another one we're really excited about. We only had an hour today, but coming up in March we're doing FormFest again. That's our virtual conference. We throw it just for our users. And imagine, kind of the session like we have right here times 20, really. We're going to be running sessions all day on March 25th. There should be a link there for registering. If not, it's going to be all over our homepage, wherever you see FormAssembly. But it really is a come in and browse the sort of buffet of sessions we'll have there, or register for everything if you want. Show up to some, get the recordings of others. We're going to be talking about everything from new and exciting stuff FormAssembly is launching to in-depth sessions like this to kind of get the most of existing features that are already on your account, and hear some of those great use case stories, answer some questions, do roundtables, all sorts of stuff. So always a great time. Love FormFest, but it's coming up soon, so feel free to register for that if you would like to see people like us and others around the company doing more sessions like this. Hope to see you there for sure.
Yes, definitely hope to see you there, because I'll be hosting one of the sessions at FormFest. So I definitely hope to see you guys there, asking all of the great questions again, because it really is just my favorite part of the job, is coming in and talking to our customers, helping them, and seeing what they're doing.
Yeah, inspired by y'all, right? It's the reason we do these kind of at least once a month, but the questions and new use cases we see all the time, again, at events or via support or writing into the knowledge team, that's exactly what inspired the sessions we're throwing this year. So, yep, check it out. I think that wraps it up, though. Thank you all so much, especially Joel, Kayla, for really getting into the cool stuff, as we keep saying, with this. Again, hopefully it was a little educational, a little inspirational, but appreciate the questions, and hopefully see you at another one soon.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Thanks for coming and joining us today.
All right. Bye, everybody.